Hello, everybody. Welcome. We'll give folks just a minute or two to join us and pop on in. We're so looking forward to the conversation today. In the chat, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd be willing to share your name, your organization, your role, we'd love to know who's on the line. We have over 500 people registered, and the group for the conversation looks fantastic. Welcome. Hi, Allie. Hi, Danielle. The first two in. Krista. Joanna, Mel, Katie, Lavanya. It's good to see you all. Hey, Jack. Beth. We'll let people popcorn in, and then as the popcorn pops slow, like in the microwave, we'll get rolling. Great to have you all. So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for joining us. We have a fantastic conversation planned for today. The discussion today is going to explore community college students, working age community college students, the disruptions due to the pandemic, and looking around the corner as we emerge from this. There are really two main questions we want to explore here. And we want to jump into the good stuff right away. So instead of doing that traditional setup where we do a presentation and then we have the conversation, which is really the good stuff, today we plan for an interactive conversation where we're just going to dive right in. So the conversation today will be around two main themes. Number one, we're seeing huge enrollment declines in community colleges and across the board in higher ed. Yet we know that demand remains strong. We know that there are 20.5 million working age adults who say they would like to attend community or technical college in the next 2 years. What do we make of that when there are the declines, yet the demand? And why does it matter? What does this mean for us, for our students, and for the economy, and for the future equity of higher ed? So we'll spend the first half of the discussion talking through those issues, puzzling through those. Secondly, if there is that strong demand, how do we mobilize that intent into action? How are we going to come through this together to reconnect, re-engage students, and have institutions better serve them to complete and succeed? So that's what we're going to do today. Looking forward to the conversation with you all. You're welcome to ask questions in the chat, discuss in the chat. We have both Holly Custard from my team at Strata and Mo McKenna from Inside Track standing by to help with that. And just really quickly, Strata Education Network, if you don't know us yet, we are a nonprofit social impact organization, and we're a network of Strata plus our affiliates, our nonprofit affiliates, including CALE, Inside Track, Education at Work, and then we also have MZ, the labor market analytics firm, is part of our affiliates. So what I'd love to do is show you all the report. And this is going to be the world's quickest flyover of a report. I believe that no other webinar will go this quickly towards what the report looks like. We did a report called Powering Purpose, and it's all about invest now in community colleges to fuel economic opportunity. We think that community colleges are a fundamental part of the infrastructure that is going to fuel our recovery and a more equitable recovery. So when you go to it, and I hope you will, we have a national report, and then we did 6 state spotlights, including New York, that I'm showing you here. And across the top, you'll see exactly what I just talked about. We've seen these precipitous enrollment declines, yet we're seeing strong demand. How are we going to mobilize that intent? What are the proven solutions? What works to bring students back, re-engage them, reconnect them, help them to complete and succeed so that we can see the full economic impact of what we're doing? So that is my flyover of the report, and we're just going to jump right on in. I'd like to start by asking each panelist to introduce themselves, your name, your institution, and I'll call on Dr. Bastin first.
Certainly good to be with you here today, Janet. My name is Dr. Michael Bastin, president of Rockland Community College. We're about 25 miles north of New York City and looking forward to the conversation.
Welcome. Dr. Silva.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really my pleasure to be with you today. I'm Dr. Adelina Silva, and I serve as the Vice Chancellor for Student Success at the Alamo Colleges District. And we're a family of 5 independently accredited colleges, all in the center of Bexar County in San Antonio, Texas. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
Yes, and the most recent winner of the Aspen Prize. Congratulations.
Thank you. San Antonio College, one of our colleges, is the best community college in the nation, according to the Aspen Prize. And we're really thrilled to be part of that family.
Yes, and everybody wants to hear about the secret sauce, which is what we'll be talking about today. Della Drummond, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Janet. Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. I am a community college graduate from Cerritos Community College in Norwalk, California. From there, I transferred to UC Berkeley, where I completed my bachelor's in psychology. And now I coordinate the Summer Bridge program, which is a transition program for entering first-year students.
Fantastic. And our researchers, Dr. Reichlin.
Hi, thanks. I'm delighted you could join us. Seth Reichlin here. I'm a senior advisor to College App, a service that helps colleges and workforce agencies find and connect with the adults who are most likely to enroll. I've had, for the Powering Purpose report, I analyzed learner demand, and I've had actually a 40-year career in higher ed research and marketing.
Super. And Melissa Levitt.
Hi, great to see everyone. Thank you all for joining us. So my name is Melissa Levitt. I'm the Director of Research for the Strata Education Network, and I am the lead author of the report that we did on community college enrollment declines and demand that we'll be sort of referencing and that Janet just did that walkthrough of. So it's great to be here.
It's great to have you. I just want to point out in this conversation that we have going here, we have community college students, more than one. We'll figure out who those folks are by the end of the session. We have representatives from ed tech. We have folks from a district office. We have a president. We have researchers. We have like really a microcosm of the ecosystem that helps students to succeed. And on the call with all of you all, I've seen we have faculty members, we have policymakers, we have ed tech folks, we have community college leaders, 4-year leaders. This is the place, this is the time, this is the conversation, and I can't wait. So here we go. So Melissa, we're seeing precipitous enrollment declines, and yet demand remains strong. Can we start with talking about the declines we saw this year? Like, did they hit evenly across all student populations, and where did they hit the hardest?
Yeah, thanks for starting here. I mean, the numbers that we saw are big and dramatic. So in the report, we spend some time parsing them and trying to make sense of them. And I think it's really helpful to sort of widen the lens to start with and really see what was going on in terms of overall in higher ed in terms of enrollment. And then we can zoom in on community colleges and then even, zero in on specific regions and specific student populations to get to your question of were they distributed evenly. So overall, higher ed enrollment declined by 2.5% in the fall. So that's already twice the decline what it had been the year before. In the spring, it was down about 4%. And of course, these are fall to fall and spring to spring comparisons. So that's already a lot. But then you look at community colleges, and that's really why our attention has turned here. That 2 to 4% enrollment decline dropped down to a double-digit decline when you look at community colleges. So the enrollment decline in the fall at community colleges was 10%. In the spring, it was 11%. So it's safe to say that this has been a really difficult year on colleges, on students, and on aspiring learners who weren't able to make that step to enrollment this year. And that's the national overview. And as you mentioned, we did a few different regional spotlights, state spotlights that we published in the report. We did Texas, we did New York. I'm highlighting those, of course, because 2 of our panelists hail from those states. And we saw a similar enrollment decline. So Texas, it was about an 8% decline in community college enrollment. New York, it was 12%. And that's what we found sort of across the board, a little over, a little under. But if you start with that kind of 10% enrollment decline as the starting point, we saw a really similar picture across the state. So in that sense, maybe in terms of geography, yes, it really was, somewhat evenly distributed, but it's a different picture when you look at the populations who were affected and the students who didn't enroll this year, because that did not hit evenly at all. So we really look at the major groups that were affected the most by this enrollment decline. It's first-time students. Declines are actually twice as large among first-time students. It's students of color. So those declines compared to the overall community college enrollment decline, it was a three times as big of a decline among Black, Latino, and Native American students. And for older students too, of course, in the higher ed world, that's 24, 25 and up, 4 times as many older students, working age students, didn't enroll. So when we look at the populations that we really took a very close look at in the report and looked at those declines, first-time learners, working age adults, and students of color.
Yeah, those are seismic shifts. Doctors Bastin and Silva, if you could, how did this year's enrollment look on the ground for you, both in terms of overall, and then who did you see missing on campus?
I will be glad to start, because I'd like to say that we really had started some new programs that might have helped us, but I can tell you that our pivoting in March to virtual learning, and a lot of the things that we did at that point in time, because of some of the systems that we have in place at the Alamo Colleges District, at all our 5 colleges, prevented us from actually having a drop. For one, we initiated conversations with all our students. We have an advising model that is assigned, each student is assigned to an advisor that stays with them for the entire time they're enrolled. And we're talking about, in a given semester, almost 70,000 students. That's our enrollment. In a year, it's about 100,000 unduplicated students. But what we did is, the first message that we said to them, we didn't say, this is trouble, or now you're going to go here, but we said, we're all in this together. I'm your advisor. We're going to go through this step by step. I'll be by your side. I'll be in constant contact, and so forth. So in the spring of 2020, we actually had the highest completion rate of any semester we'd ever had. And it might be because we were doing this reach out. So for the fall of 2020, we actually, at the Alamo Colleges District, had a 0.8% increase, rounded off to a 1% increase in enrollment for that semester. And it's all attributed to the little actionable items all together. So that was one thing, but a lot of things coming together. And one of them was Alamo Advice, and the communication, the texting, the emailing, the back and forth. And a lot of our trained advisors were starting off with a weekly message. The first one, we're all in it together. The next week is about continue on your degree plan. The next week is how are you doing with tutoring, and so forth. And so it was just a constant, consistent, at scale message for all our students.
Yeah, it's a way to buck the trends and act more like a public access 4-year, or who were having much less bad experiences, or getting into the more elite colleges that saw a growth in demand.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bastin, were you able to buck it as well, or did you all take the roller coaster ride?
I used to really talk about what we went through last year as sort of surfing on Jello. And you were certainly going for a ride, and that's the ride we took. It's a tale of 2 communities. Remember that at the beginning of the pandemic, New York was one of the hardest hit communities in the country. And so the impact of the physical toll on our community was devastating. The first major cases, which happened in Westchester County, actually had people from Rockland County, the neighboring county, that were a part of that cluster that ultimately became the major spread. So we were, for many months, sort of an epicenter of an extraordinarily challenging experience. So we really were more like the national average of about 10% down fall and spring. And we certainly saw the decline primarily in the folks who are economically fragile, the first generation students, the students of color, particularly Black men, Latinx men, were a very, very tough population in terms of getting the students to come. And the reality is a lot of people did not to come back to college for a myriad of reasons, not the least being some got COVID. Some had to care for someone with COVID. Some had to do all of the essential work that kept the country going, like going to the delivery of food and the nursing and the hospitals and all of the frontline folks that actually usually come to our colleges. So it was a very, very challenging time, and we're going to be feeling the effects of the realities of this epidemic for quite some time.
Thank you for that. There's been a real variety, and I'm glad here to also hear you talk about who was most impacted as well, because these are all deeply troubling in terms of the coming equity pipeline of how are we going to produce the grads. Switching gears for a moment from the declines into enduring demand, I was hoping, Seth, that you could share with us your data, which your data looked very much like the Strata Public Viewpoint data when we surveyed, that showed really strong demand for community and technical college. I think it's because people know they need the education to get the jobs and the careers that they want. So if you could show us both what you're seeing and give us a quick overview of the methodology. I'll share my screen so people can see our really super beautiful data visualization that we did using college app data. I'm super proud of it.
Thanks, Janet. So before we jump into it, let me first take a moment to explain the two meanings of demand. So the first is employer demand, which using data from employer surveys and job postings, the labor market analysts can predict how many job openings will be available in a region and what education and training credentials those jobs require. So for the Powering Purpose report, we mostly talk about learner demand, which is a measure of how many potential students want to enroll in a college, university, or vocational training program. So to measure learner demand, College App uses person-level modeling, a technique developed for presidential campaigns starting in 2008. College App's person-level models are done state by state. In each state, College App surveys thousands of adults drawn from a comprehensive consumer database that includes dozens of demographic, educational, financial, and household variables compiled from publicly available sources. The College App survey asks each respondent, quote, do you intend to enroll in an education or training program in the next 2 years? And also whether they prefer university, community college, or vocational technical school as a provider of that education and training. College App then applies machine learning to find the patterns in the survey data that best predict who answered yes to each question and who prefers each type of institution. Once we finish testing the reliability of the state predictive models, we apply the models back to the entire database for each state and assign a series of intent to enroll and institution preference scores to each adult. So here's what College App scoring looks like in the Brownsville neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. Median household income in this section of Brownsville is about $27,000, and a large percentage of residents have high intent to enroll scores. This map snippet shows a 10-block area in Brownsville. Each pushpin represents a person who has high intent to enroll score and who prefers either community college or vocational technical school. The darker the pushpin, the higher the intent to enroll score. For outreach, we have their addresses and phone numbers as well as emails for many. So Janet, if you could shift to the, go up a level and look at all of Brooklyn. Yeah, so this is Brooklyn. Here's zooming out, here's a map of the adults in Brooklyn who have high intent to enroll scores and who prefer community college or vocational technical. Each dot represents one person, and as before, the more saturated the dot, the higher the intent to enroll score. So you can see that learner demand is concentrated in the northern sections, northern part of Kings County, in neighborhoods like Bushwick and Brownsville. If you look in Park Slope, by contrast, relatively few adults have modeled high intent to enroll in community college. So Janet, if you could zoom out to the zip code view. So, yeah, in this map, we've totaled the adult community college learner demand by zip code. The highest numbers and percentages are in Northeast Brooklyn. And if you can, Janet, if you could hover over, yeah, there you go. So about 13,000 adults in zip 11208 have high intent to enroll score and prefer community college or vocational technical school. So the pattern is pretty clear. So we see that adults in low income areas have the greatest demand for education and training, especially at community colleges. If you go one level out to New York State. Yeah, okay, so the New York State map shown here summarizes adult learner demand for community college and or vocational education in each New York county. The shading indicates the percentage of adults aged 25 and up in each county who have high intent to enroll and prefer either community college or VOTEC school. So if you could hover over, maybe zoom in and hover over Kings County.
Yes, I just taught myself this little lasso tool.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, keep going.
There we go. And then here we have Kings County.
All right. So in Kings County, we've identified over 185,000 adults with high intent scores and high preference for community college, which represents about 11% of the population aged 25 and up. So if anyone would like a similar analysis for your state or region, please let us know in the chat window and we'll try to schedule that for you. So that's an overview of the learner demand methodology.
Great. And I found Rockland County and I can see why there were so many COVID affected people for New York City. I'm sure that is absolutely feeder of low income folks going into the city to do that sort of frontline work that is going to put them in danger. I mean, really, this all brings me back to equity. You have this incredibly strong demand that Seth is pointing out, that we're showing that folks who are low income really are planning to go back to school to get what they need. I think that that's one of the most hopeful parts in this whole turning the corner piece, is that while the equity pipeline has been deeply disturbed by COVID and folks, their lives have been just hammered by what's going on, folks are already looking ahead and they know what they need. So I'm really wondering, like, pulling up to this bigger picture, how are we going to address those equity gaps? And what is it going to take to bring folks back in the door, right? Like, we know we have this intent. So I was thinking about when we pull up to that big picture, and when we listen to folks, we know they need to upskill and reskill. I'm wondering, Della, if you can hearken way back in the Wayback Machine to when you were thinking about going back to college, like, what motivated you and where were your hesitations and how did you come to make the decision?
Thank you for asking, Janet. I was working in an industry that was in decline and had survived a couple of layoffs and didn't survive the final cut, and decided, okay, I'm fine with this. I want to go back to school and complete my degree, and wasn't sure, had no idea what direction I wanted to go in, but decided, because I saw some commercials, I'm going to go to originally a VOTEC school. I thought I wanted to train to be a massage therapist. And I started along that path and discovered that over the course of time, I had developed all of the focus and all of the discipline that I didn't have when I went to school in the early 80s, straight out of high school. And parlayed that into a VOTEC school degree, then decided I wanted to continue and went to Cerritos College. Somewhere in the VOTEC school, I became fascinated by the idea of the mind's connection to healing, and went to Cerritos College as a psychology student, and from there ended up transferring. My motivation, I think, initially was just to have something to do. It became a matter of my actually following a passion, though, over the course of time. And it also became a landscape that was increasingly familiar to me, because I learned how the academies worked. And once I knew that, I was able to move forward to the place where I ultimately am now, which is helping other students kind of demystify education.
Yeah, and when you look at your students, those students, even if they're not working age adults looking at community colleges, what we found in our research in talking with working age adults is that the issues and the barriers that they're facing are the same as for low income traditional age students. So like, what are you seeing there with your students?
Post-pandemic, or from pandemic forward, I'm seeing students who are reluctant to leave home, or students who, to Dr. Bastin's point earlier, have a role that has become enlarged because of the destabilization of their family. Young people, very young people, are taking on responsibilities that, you might not ordinarily anticipate them having within their families. And as a result of that, people are just less reluctant to leave home. I am seeing fewer people who say, I'm not going at all. I'm seeing more people who are saying, I'm going to just do the community college and then transfer later because I need to work, or I'm going to stay closer to home and do a state school so that I can actually live home, as opposed to, making this trip up north to Northern Cal.
Definitely. And what else are you all seeing on the ground at the community colleges as far as what students are facing?
And when you think about it, it is interesting that we're saying that there's still a lot of demand. Well, it's because hopes and dreams didn't go away because the pandemic came. People do want to get ahead. People do want to have the life that they deserve. People do want to be able to feel like they can pursue their dreams. The challenge is they are wondering, can I do it? Am I going to be accepted into the college? And am I going to be able to afford it? Just because the tuition is low doesn't mean all the other bills that are associated with my ability to come to college don't exist, because they do. Am I going to be able to navigate the forms? Or do I even think that I'm eligible for financial aid because I have a little job that pays me a few dollars, and then I think I'll probably have 3 more nickels beyond what I could get from any kind of financial assistance. And so we've got to be able to help people understand that you actually can do it. And it is incumbent upon institutions to not just simply put the burden on being observers of the problem. We have a lot of institutions that basically say, well, listen, we're here. Anytime they're ready to come, we're here. You're observing the problem. If you know within data sets like Seth is discussing, that in your community, there are folks who desire to have an opportunity, how are you communicating with them? How are you connecting with them? How are you helping them understand that this is a possibility for real? And how do you show them that there are diverse pathways even within your institution, whether it is a shorter term credential or the degree that of your choice? All of that has to be very leaned in by institutions that are going to make a difference in the lives of students. And so it's not enough to observe the problem. I think this country, we're very, very good at observing the problem, commentating on the problem, speculating on the problem, and even having some ideas about how to address the problem. But the challenge is in the doing. And I think we've got to do more doing as we move forward.
Absolutely. And when Dr. Silva was talking about what they did to re-engage their students, what else did you do in addition to all that to build that sense?
One of the pieces that I totally agree with the sharing of experiences and services that are provided is that students have that intent. They dream the dream of coming to college. They just really don't have the family member that they can turn to that's gone to college in my region that can say, this is how you do it. It doesn't seem like tuition. What is tuition? Students will ask you, where do we go get our books? And they don't know the part that you purchase books when you're in college. And so you try to address all of that information. We're saying, si se puede, yes, you can go to college, because even though the dreams are there, often life gets in the way, and the life of all of those things. For one, we had a pandemic this year. We also in South Texas had an incredible freeze that we didn't know what to do and how to do. But it's not just about that. It's just the fact that you don't see yourself as in our area, we have a majority minority. Latinos are 69% of our enrollment, and our African-American students. So it's that they don't see themselves as part of that experience. And I think it's up to us to do that. So up to us at the colleges to say, this is how you do it. This is why we want you here. This is what we're going to do to help you succeed. The Alamo Colleges has a moonshot, and our moonshot is to fight poverty in San Antonio by partnering through education. So we've engaged the entire county, the entire region, in having conversations about how we're going to change the trajectory of our students. Our students, on the average, are about 20,000 students graduate from high school a year, and less than 47% of them even show up anywhere near a college or university anywhere. And with the pandemic, it was going to be much, much worse. So, and it was just a timely thing, because we'd already done that before the pandemic. We'd already addressed that. We'd already gone to our city government. We'd already gone to all our community. We have this organization that I lead. It's called the San Antonio Regional Career and College Consortium. It's about how do you get people to go to work. This is community-based organizations. This is institutes of higher education in our area. It's all our public schools, all our preschools, all our elected officials, all our principals from all of the colleges and so forth, and employers, because employers too are incredible stakeholders in helping fund possibilities, because they want a person that's prepared, not just in the credentialing and in the academics, but also in the leadership skills and the punctuality and all of those things that make you a citizen that they want to hire. And so this is what we're after. We're after fighting poverty, organizing, and getting people to fund. And so we started our moonshot, and we funded Alamo Promise. Everything is Alamo because it's Alamo for students. So it's Alamo Advise, actually assigns an advisor, but now Alamo Promise goes out to the lower, it's half of our county, it's 25 high schools. And we say, if you graduated from high school and you had intentions to go to community college, you need to pledge, you need to say, I want to. And then we have enrollment coaches that scurry to these individuals and say, this is how you do it. This is different from advising. This is at the onboarding stage. And what they're doing is they're saying, this is how you pledge. This is what a semester looks like. This is what enrollment is going to be like. This is how you schedule classes. This is how you apply for financial aid. This is how you manage multiple roles of working and going to school and being a whatever. It could be a parent, because sometimes they're older, but this is really the high school group. And if you do all of that and you enroll for at least 9 semester hours, it will be in all of your tuition and fees will be paid. Now, we didn't include the books, but we did include all of that. So a lot of times the students can get ebooks. It's about all the wraparound services that we have to partner with our bookstore, our ebooks, our all of the different possibilities that because we have learned, and those of us that have gone, and I'll just say, those of us that went to a community college I'm one of those persons that went to the community college that is now the best in the nation. I have an associate degree from San Antonio College decades and decades ago. But I can tell you that you get there and you don't know, because it's not in your experience to say, I don't know what happens when I'm not good at something or when I need something. So we need to really be very proactive, very intentional, very prescriptive for the student. This is how you can do it. We have an agreement. You want to succeed. This is how we're going to do it together. And so the idea that we can give you free tuition, but you must come, you pledge, you have to fill out your financial aid, you meet with your advisor at certain touch points. We have some peer advising going on. You tell us if there's a shortage, because we already know at our colleges that over 40% of them are housing insecure. Then we have a lot of people that are food insecure. And so we have to wrap around our whole partnering piece, not just about the academics, which is the core of our business. What happens in the classroom definitely goes first. And there's a lot of development for our teachers and so forth, our faculty. But that world outside of the classroom, we have to surround that students with what we call on our campuses wraparound services. We have to talk to you now. It's even increased to mental illness. It's increased to other things that are related to what's happening today. And we just have to be aware of that. We have to get the feedback from students, survey, they ask them, report what they're saying, because if we're not responsive, then we can't even hold on to the students that have come to us because they want to, and then even to attract new ones. So we really, it's a marketing, and it's a supply and demand. We really need to be responsive to the individuals in our region that need us, because they do need us, and we're here to supply their preparation for employment and for their careers, but we also need to hold them and have a soft handoff all the steps of the way. So that's what we constantly work on. We constantly work on our opportunities for improvement, get feedback. Did we do that right? What is it that we're not doing? How is it that we can improve? And then partnering, because we alone do not have the resources to do it all.
One thing I would add to that is this, that we have to also have, for an adult learner, academic programs that they can feel comfortable in. Yes. So they have to have laddering opportunities. We need to make sure that we're providing the shorter term credentials that ultimately provide them an entryway, because some can't commit to 2 years and 4 years right away, but they can commit maybe to a semester to get a credential, to get their foot in the door. And that means that educational institutions have to say, as we give you the shorter term credentials, what we want you to be able to do is come back and get into the associate degree program with credit for prior learning. Or that means we want you to develop the stackable credential opportunities. So as you're making progress, we're going to issue you certificates. So that if you have to stop out for whatever reason, we can make sure that you are prepared to re-engage with us along your educational journey. If you really want to build momentum with the adult learner, you have to recognize, and we have to recognize, that some of our adults, quite frankly, I'm going to say this and people are going to be surprised, I'm sure, there are commitment issues for older people. Oh, yeah. Older people don't like to make a lot of long-term commitments. Older people like to make shorter-term commitments that then they can extend. So, you know, they will do that first step on the ladder, because quite frankly, look at all of the people who started college and have no degree. They were not able, they got some credits, they have no degree, so they didn't keep the commitment then. And so if it didn't work then, why do we think that it would automatically work now? Get people in shorter-term credentials, give them credit for prior learning, allow them to get the career exploration at the beginning of the experience so that they can get on a path, that they can build the confidence and the momentum, and you will see that the demand will be met with the same level of intensity in terms of the intentionality of those students. Yes, they may desire to move into the college space, but the college has to desire to make it easier for them to do so. It's easier for them to drop out than to get in some of our institutions. And so we've got to be thinking about all of that, particularly if we're trying to get the adult learner.
I want to jump in
you're already addressing some of the questions that folks had in the chat. So thank you. Go ahead, Della.
I was just going to say, I want to amen corner what Dr. Bastin and Dr. Silva have said about, in particular, offering more bite-sized increments of educational and mastery that allows the student to move, I would say, I guess, between back and forth from education to workspace. I'll speak from the standpoint of having been a parent and going to school. There are times where my focus, my priorities needed to shift. And under those circumstances, it was great for me to have the opportunity to start out in literally a 9-month certificate program, which grew into, I think, an 18-month AS degree. And from there on to another degree and another as those opportunities were presented and as my priorities could match my aspirations. So thank you for bringing up the bite-sized increment. And to something that Dr. Silva said about acknowledging the students, the actual lived experience. I'm in a space where there's a particular, the expectation is that the students who are coming to this academy graduated high school a month ago and come in and they have no worries about financial aid. They have no gaps in their understanding, and they understand how things work. And the population of students with whom I work tend to not have, to Dr. Silva's point, someone that they can turn to and say, how does this work? Or, do I fill out this form or this form? And so one of the things that UC Berkeley has a long and growing commitment to is to make space for these first-time college students, the first-generation student, the low-income student, the student who has consistently been told your dreams and aspirations are a fallacy, that there's nothing that's valid about you, little person of color or a person who's an immigrant. There's nothing valid about your wanting to get ahead in this country. And so the particular program that I work with, Summer Bridge, has been operating nonstop since 1973 and has grown from probably a dozen or so students initially up to 350 on average each summer. And these are students who can really make use of the wraparound services, the having someone who will explain just what is financial aid, how does that work, what's the difference between FAFSA and DREAM Act, what are my options if I need to, based on my immigration status, stay a little bit under the radar. What about if I graduated from a high school that was not well resourced, and so I don't feel confident in my math skills, but I want to go to med school? So these are the students that we're able to offer services to that will help them. We introduce them to other organizations on campus that are specifically chartered to fulfill or help them fulfill particular requirements. We make sure that they have an entree to internships and opportunities that are going to introduce them to the workplace. But one of the things that I have noticed about the students that I work with is they come in with a nice set of skills in terms of being able to access the power of having been the person who was the interpreter for their family. So they know stuff, or the person who managed money in their family, or the people who, these are students who just have had to operate from a standpoint where their skill sets are not the skill sets that the university necessarily lauds. They may not have come from schools that were college prep, but they know how to navigate in the world. And basically all they need is to be able to learn how to navigate within the space of the academy. And they turn it on its ear. They do some amazing things. These are the most amazing students to have an opportunity to work with. They come in loving life and being really interested in taking advantage of the hand that reaches out to help them.
Sometimes they
And
just,
you're, Go ahead.
Sometimes they just need the reaffirmation of their own self-efficacy, that no one has really done that in an academic setting. And we try to do that. And just a quick example is the Alamo Promise student that might not have prepared for the last 4 years to be on a college-bound curriculum. Now they are short. And so we have a summer bridge program for that reason, to say, you don't have to start behind. You're going to catch up to summer, and in the fall, you will be right along with everybody else that took all the other courses. Plus, the sooner they do career exploration, which we also do in the summer, and this is some of the training that we actually provide for our advisors and our onboarding enrollment coaches, is the choices about careers and which way to go. And that all of that, the quicker they decide where they're headed, the quicker they can start on their journey to get there. And so all of those handouts are so critically important because we know that that is the population that has not had that before. And once they get a little bit at a time, they will continue. And I'll just say one more thing to also support and actually really endorse what Dr. Bastin just said, is that we're learning that our adult population, because we have a whole entire program in Bexar County that is actually about upskilling individuals that lost their jobs during the pandemic. We have a service industry. We're big on tourism in San Antonio. And so all of those individuals are coming to the Alamo colleges and saying, we'd like to participate in a lot of the funded programs. But what they want is they want it quick and small bites, as we saying, quick courses. They also are saying we want the skill sets and the competencies, and we want the certificates, but not necessarily the credentials. And so we've just launched, and I don't have the complete work because my brain is still working on how I'm going to finish that. But some of it is, we're calling it CE to credit. You start with a continuing ed program. We're going to go ahead and be able to give you credit for prior learning on these CE programs so that then you can continue. So we want to make it pretty seamless. Like once you get the momentum of being successful, then you want to stay. And that works. People telling you you're successful, you're feeling it, you feel your confidence level, you feel your potential, or do some leadership training. It's all going to be pretty well at the end. So.
Yeah, and we really wanted to surface things about what's working. So I've heard lots of things around how are we going to mobilize the intent of all these folks who want to come back? What are the solutions that work that are going to reconnect, re-engage, and speed people to their goal, which is to get some sort of credential. Generally, hiding underneath there is folks want and need jobs and careers that will build happy, healthy, sustaining lives and communities. So I was hoping we could do a lightning round. What do we know about proven evidence-based solutions and strategies, particularly around connecting education to employment? Melissa, if you want to jump in quick with a couple of them while other folks think about their quick hits on what's working.
No, sure, absolutely. This has been such a great conversation. I think it's so interesting that what started off as a conversation about enrollment decline and enrollment demand, like we're already talking about what happens after graduation and what's the next phase. And I think that's exactly right based on what we found, because we really know from our research that to bring students back, we have to be prepared to support them and help them get to their goals and connect education and careers. So we talk about guidance, guidance for navigating the education pathway and for understanding career outcomes. We talk about coaching that brought students back who were really close to completing. We talk about coaching from Inside Track that was really focused on that. We talk about many things already mentioned in terms of the prior learning assessments, helping students get that quicker path to graduation. And we're able to cite some research from Kale on that. And then in terms of connecting education to career, we actually found really exciting outcomes from something that's sort of been around for a while, and it's apprenticeship. So we took a close look at an apprenticeship program in advanced manufacturing in Kentucky that not only, had better outcomes in terms of graduation outcomes and career placement for folks that were part of the apprenticeship program, but it's so fascinating. We know this from a Brookings analysis of the program, that in terms of student reported outcomes and student reported learning outcomes, the folks who got the most out of the learning and classroom experience actually were folks who didn't think that they would come to college at all. They didn't really see college as part of their path until they knew what that career outcome would be. So I think that right there is such a great example of, a tool that is all about what happens after graduation was actually a tool to get people in and to build that sense of belonging that that we've been speaking about today. So those are some quick ways, but it's really all about bring students back by helping them see what comes after. And there's a phrase that someone said, make the moment and make the resources meet their aspirations. So to focus on those long-term aspirations is so important.
Other things about transitioning folks to the workplace, making sure that we're making strong connections for them to employment.
I think certainly part of what we're doing at Rockland is we have career assessments at the beginning embedded in their application that says that they've been accepted. So you've been accepted. Now the next step in the process of your enrollment is to take a career interest inventory, because that then leads you to getting in the appropriate onboarded process, or the school. We were organized into 5 schools so that you can get into your introduction to the schools course and start the process. The earlier you can begin career sort of exploration and embed it in a process that's inescapable. We don't need to continue to have services that are sort of ones that can be easily observed and not used. We need to embed the kinds of things that we want and to nudge. The Castleman work on nudging. Find the ways to use the process that will ultimately get them not to be a barrier, but to really be a breakthrough strategy for making good decisions. And connecting that career focus through that enrolling process would be extraordinarily helpful to students. And then I just want to say one thing about the employment piece. We've got to also work with our employers, because they have threshold credentials for positions, and those, just because you got a bachelor's or you have a master's, that doesn't necessarily mean you have the skill set to be effective. And so you're already lopping off tons of people who've got great skills who could actually serve your institutions well, because you're using as the primary metric a credential that doesn't necessarily evidence that the students have the skills to do the jobs. So we've got to together begin to look at how we work with employers to help them not miss out on the great students, that particularly those who are doing work at the community college.
Employers are stakeholders. They, in fact, have vested interest in who we're producing in terms of who we're preparing to be their employees. We have a very, very common experience with that. And about 18 months ago, and actually it's prior to the pandemic, our chancellor required me, and as a vice chancellor, it was on me, and I'm one of the co-champions of this effort, is to have every student before graduation participate in an experiential learning activity. That's a requirement. I'm not measuring that yet because we've launched it, and we had a little bit of interruption in face-to-face, but we continue to develop our models. So we have now what we call Alamo Experience, and we have a transcript where we have academic record, that's our typical transcript. And then we have a second transcript that is it's not to say it's non-academic, but it's not in the curriculum. It's all of the activities. It's your workshops. It's your community service. It's all of your field experiences. It's leadership training. It's any of those experiential learning activities. And it gets documented on a transcript. So the Alamo College's student has an academic transcript and they have an experience transcript. And we went to the employers to say, we're going to do this. You think it's a good idea? And of course, they thought it was a fabulous idea, because what's happening to our students is they're taking the learning in the classroom and they're not, or maybe before they weren't making the complete connection with, this is how I'm going to use what I learned in the classroom on the job or in my field later. So before you may enter an item into the Alamo Experience transcript, it's submitted, and it has to be a reflection paper. I learned this concept and now I know how to do this at work. And so we have an assessment and it gets populated. And so that's the way we're doing it. The other piece is that the employers are providing more and more workplace experiences and practicums and things, paid internships, because what we found for our low-income students, our non-traditional students that don't usually have professional parents, is that they lack the network of how to connect with high employability. They don't know. I could say to my son, oh, you should contact my friend who's a physician or a dentist and go spend a practicum over there. But if you don't have that connection, we need to provide it for them. So that's another part of the equation in fighting poverty in our area. We're trying to get our young students that do not normally have that connection to have a network of possibilities for future employment. So Alamo Experience is helping on that.
Yeah, and to get to some of the questions in the chat to wrap us up with a big picture question, because we've looked at the declines, the demand, and then what's going to mobilize intent for these students so that they can come back. There's a lot of money being put into community colleges right now. And we also know that wraparound supports are expensive. Remaking your curriculum can be expensive. I'm wondering, what are you all seeing in the big picture as far as flexibility to use those dollars, or places you're going to learn about ways you can use those dollars flexibly?
Well, we do. I'll just be brief. We do have advocacy centers at each one of our colleges prior to this occurring, and we're managing the majority of that through those advocacy centers. And those are the individuals that are helping individuals find housing, find daycare services, find ways for them to mental health, not just mental health, physical health. We have partnerships that we're bringing in. And a lot of that, of course, goes directly to students, but that's really where it's needed because we have such a low income area and our students are experiencing barriers that I said it's because life is happening. A lot of them lost their jobs, lots of them have been sick, family members that they've lost, daycare issues with children that the daycares are not open and neither are the schools. So it's an incredible hardship to be a student right now. And I think these funds are addressing that as best that they can. And we have entire committees to set up of what is the best way to invest, the better return on investment from a student perspective.
Much of the resources that we are expending really are going around attracting adult learners, supporting adult learners with the wraparound supports that were mentioned. You know, from my point of view, it is very important that our students become what we call real world ready, that they have the ability to have some learn and earn opportunities connected to the displacement that they have faced through COVID so that they are allowable. So it is very important as we think about how to expend resources that we have to also think about the audit function and the allowability. So we've got to be thinking about being creative within the context of the fact that we are trying to impact those who have been impacted by COVID. And so we want to make sure that for those adult learners in our community that are not currently being engaged, that they are not connected to employment opportunities and ladders, opportunities for the kind of credentials that will give them family supporting wages, that we double down on how we make that happen for them. And also that we continue to challenge existing systems. Students do not come to the college to major in bureaucracy. And so we think that by putting them through all of the hoops and the barriers, they don't get a degree on did we do the registration process well. They don't get a grade on whether they filled out line 37 in the FAFSA form. And so we have to not have so much of a premium on their ability to navigate our structures and systems. And some of the resources have to help us help them and get some of the sort of the work out of going to college out of their hands.
Yeah, I loved when you said that mobilizing intent isn't just about, on our prep call, it isn't just about mobilizing the intent of the students, it's mobilizing the intent of the institution to serve the students. And what I've loved about what each of you has said, it has been so learner-centered around, it's so clear how people are ready to make progress in their lives. If we could just get the barriers out of their way and serve them so they can get on their way for this recovery, no doubt about it. I would talk to you all day, but I have to cut this off. Big thank you to each of you for sharing your gifts and your stories. Please stay tuned to the audience members. One of the things we'd love to do is we want to do a full series over the course of the next months through at least the end of the year that is all about reconnecting people to the promise of higher ed for better lives. So one of the pieces that we have in mind is definitely around this financing piece of giving you all real world examples of how to do that and learning more about how people have been disrupted, how they're coping, and how institutions are mobilizing so that they can serve that intent. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
pleasure.
Janet.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.